It's time, episode 51, the ATM podcast. Martin Devlin, I work for the platform. Mark Watson is an international broadcaster who has covered the full gamut all around the world, specialising in his beloved athletics, amongst other things. And one of the great opinion makers and leaders in New Zealand sport, in my opinion. We've got lots to talk about. Shag with the Wallabies, or is that just a big clickbait headline? The All Blacks box this weekend. The Women's Football World Cup. The Warriors. How deep do they go in the playoffs? World Athletics champs.
Apologise to me!
Watto, let's kick it off with the blazing headlines about Sir Steve Hansen's defection. That was what it was called on News Hub today. TV1 got it completely wrong as well. We've spoken to the man, and he says he's working with Eddie Jones for a few days, not getting paid, and he told Ian Foster all about it. Is this a big deal or not in your mind?
Oh, I think from a perception point of view, it is. Look, I'm not comfortable with it. I've listened to the audio that you've put up on social media from Steve Hansen. I've read his rationale behind it. It still doesn't sit comfortably with me. Yes, he's going into Wallabies camp. Yes, he's putting it down to mateship, and that this is all about rugby. There's these lifelong friendships that are forged, even with your greatest enemies, and sort of playing that card a little bit. Look, you're knighted for services to New Zealand rugby primarily. You lose a Rugby World Cup and you still get knighted. In my opinion, this is not a good look, and they can justify it all they want. People can come out and defend it. Look, I think there's a lot in it. I think the media organisations these days just do my head in with the clickbait headlines and taking things well and truly out of proportion. Look, I'm not a big fan of Steve Hansen. I never have been. I wasn't happy with the way he, along with Chu, primarily shifted us, as I said last week, from being rugby fans to All Black fans, basically making a mockery of Super Rugby all in the name of the All Blacks. I didn't like the way he dealt with the Sevens team in 2016 and how those players just put their hand up and then suddenly were unavailable and left us in a pretty precarious position. He said, judge us on the World Cup in 2019. We knighted him and we lost. He talked about players staying loyal. Now he's working there in Japan and trying to lure a lot of our first-class rugby players over to Japan. What about the stay loyal to New Zealand rugby thing? Different story when he's out of it. So I've never been a big fan. Just my opinion. I've always questioned his integrity. That's just my opinion personally. I know other people will think differently. Look, he's entitled to do what he does. Brendan McCullum goes and coaches the England cricket team, doesn't he? And we're going to come up against them at times. The difference is, as I said, Brendan hasn't been knighted. Steve Hansen has. It was for services to New Zealand rugby. I didn't like it when Sir Graham Henry, after the 2011 Rugby World Cup, started helping Argentina, and a year later was sitting up in the Argentina coaching box at Eden Park. That just didn't sit right with me either. Look, he's there because they think he can offer something. Now, if he's going to offer something that is helping Australia, that is advancing their cause, however you want to put it, whether he's getting paid or not, he is helping the Australians. We know in these matches, we saw it last year when we probably should have lost a test, that the game comes down to very, very small percentages. And his intellectual property might be 0.01%, but it might be the difference. So it doesn't sit comfortably with me, but then I don't also like the way the media have made this to be much bigger than it probably actually is.
Yeah, look, I think it's a great assessment, actually. I personally don't think it's a great look, especially the timing of, and even if he has spoken to Ian Foster. I mean, we are talking about a World Cup, and we all know the ramifications and implications for the sport here in New Zealand. And also, you are who you are because of the fact you've coached the All Blacks. And I felt the same way about Graham Henry. And I thought that the indecent haste with which he jumped to Argentina, part of the other thing, Mark, is that, these guys actually do say, hey, look, once their job is finished, I don't want to be involved anymore. Steve Hansen was very firm in that. I don't want to be involved in the media anymore. Don't call me about things. And it just seems the exact opposite, doesn't it? It's almost hard to prize them all away.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, look, the guns for hire. For me, it just lacks a bit of integrity. As I said, it's just not a good look. The Wallabies, we've seen with Rugby World Cups, the best teams going into the tournament don't necessarily win them. There's a lot of things that play out. We saw South Africa we beat the South Africans in the pool play of the Rugby World Cup. They go and how to win it. Things have only got to play out slightly differently, and there's no reason why Australia can't win this World Cup. I think we saw enough in the test against the All Blacks in Dunedin to say that they are still capable, 15 on 15. I just keep coming back to it, man. You've gone down as one of the great All Black coaches. You've built your name and reputation off the back of the All Blacks. Really, I mean, you're over there on holiday. Yes, he's a mate of yours, but yeah, just be a bit smarter and say no.
All Blacks versus Box this weekend. Box have already named their strongest side. That means that we're naming ours as well. No more fanning around. No more rest and rotation, Mark. This is it. From now on, we are playing World Cup rugby, are we not?
Absolutely. And if we get injuries, we get injuries. We cannot afford to not put a first-string team out there. They just haven't played enough rugby. The last one was Bledisloe Cup 1 was the last time we had a full team out there on the field. And then there's still, another 2 or 3 weeks before we actually do play our first test. So if you don't put your number one team out here now, boy, we go in well and truly underdone against the French in that opening game of the World Cup. And, I saw them playing Fiji on the weekend. I thought Fiji were actually very, very good. Do not underestimate some of those Pacific Island nations at this Rugby World Cup. So, we've got to put our best team out there. And, if players get injured, players get injured. You cannot wrap guys in cotton wool. I think if you said previously, they could easily get injured in training as well, as much as anything. But again, we need to go out there. We need to make another statement, don't we? And we need to make sure that, we're combative at that contact area, at that breakdown area. We've got to, we were brilliant at Mount Smart Stadium in that test against the Box in that first half an hour in terms of that big phrase word these days, ruck speed, getting that ball quickly, setting up the first and second phase, getting your cleaners in there. I didn't see it against the Australians in that second Bledisloe Cup test. As I said, I felt like we were a little bit more back in the Steve Hansen era where we were just, sort of running left and right. And it worked against Australia that day. But we've got to play South Africa the way we want to play Ireland, the way we want to play the French. And that's the way the Irish play the game. That's beating them at their own game. And this is, yes, we want to win this test. It's not an exhibition. It's got plenty of meaning to it. But we want to approach this game the way we want to approach that French game and that Irish game.
Apologise to me!
Mark Watson with us. All right, the Women's Football World Cup has been done. It's been dusted. I think it's a fabulous tournament. I just thought it was a lot of fun, mate. And and the fact that New Zealanders turned out in their droves and wicked weather and economic conditions which aren't conducive to spending hundreds of bucks watching sports events, the fact that we packed these stadiums out, I kind of look back at it now and just think, yeah, awesome. That was great. It doesn't mean that there is going to be thousands of women all of a sudden turning up to watch women's soccer in New Zealand. It doesn't mean that. It's the same as the Black Ferns at the Rugby World Cup, and we'll keep beating this drum, even though no one seems to be listening to it, Mark. That, look, it is what it is. It's a world event, and New Zealanders love the big stage and the glamour and glitz of it all. It's now up to the association involved, the administration, New Zealand Football, to stop thinking about hosting a men's World Cup, which is just bloody ridiculous, and actually concentrate your energies, your focus, your time, your money, your resources and everything else on how to capitalise on what you have just seen. Because this has been given on a plate, mate. I mean, FIFA have just handed the game back to New Zealand football and said, here, we've aroused all the interest, do something with it.
Yeah, and the answer's not continuing to just provide a huge amount of resource for our women's team and providing more games for them. It's now taking the money that's come from FIFA and actually putting it into the clubs, putting it into coaching, building changing rooms for young girls or whatever is required, because there has been a shift from this game predominantly being played by boys to now having a huge uptake at a grassroots level with the girls. It's still about investing at a grassroots level to capitalise on this. I don't care what anyone says. Our senior women's team are not that good. We don't play good football. They are going to continue to lose, and they are not going to get the crowds without the World Cup tag aligned with them. So yes, how do you capitalise? You invest in good coaching, you put money into the clubs, and you make sure there is a really good pathway. And yes, you still want to have your women's team as part of your window front, but it shouldn't be anything. In fact, now it's time to start putting money back into the All Whites and allow them to try and put their best foot forward at a men's World Cup. Because yes, as big as the Women's World Cup is, it's nothing on the scale of the Men's World Cup. as I said every week, it's presented itself beautifully. I thought the ticket pricing was just brilliant in terms of encouraging people to get along and watch it. Look, the standard of football was pretty average, and people go, "Oh, you shouldn't compare the men's with the women's." But the problem is,
well, you can't
all I do is watch men's football. So of course, it's natural to draw comparisons, and you do draw comparisons. But what was pleasing is that there were some players in Spain. There were some players. I thought Daly for England was excellent. There were some Nigerian, some players in different teams, particularly Colombia, who had a skill set, I think, which was as good as what I've seen amongst a lot of the men. The problem is they don't quite have the critical mass of players who can do that, but you can sort of see where the game can get to eventually. What I like is I love to see the emotion. I love to get on the websites and see how the Spanish are celebrating this, get on webcams in Madrid and sort of see Party Central being set up, and just how engaged those countries are. And that's a nice reflection on New Zealand. Look, the other thing too, though, I thought that, and again, there's pretty good pieces written. Look, we shouldn't be afraid to be able to criticise the women's game. I think it's a sign of respect. I think it was good to see that finally we were talking women's football at this World Cup at times more around the selections, more around the way the teams were set up, some of the strategy, rather than what we saw with the Rugby World Cup, where it was all just about women's rights and, shoving it up men. This was actually talking more about the game. Women's football's here. We've moved past that, breaking down the barriers and all those political stories that we heard around the Rugby World Cup. So, yeah, look, I'm going to miss it. Really, really good. I'm so pleased that Spain ended up winning it. Felt a little bit disappointed for the English. But I think what it also highlighted, look, for all the hype in Australia, the Matildas actually just weren't that good. They weren't that good. They were lucky to get past the French. They were beaten by Sweden badly. They were beaten by England badly. And now some sort of ridiculous statement over them about building a statue to go alongside the one of Wally Lewis in Brisbane. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Apologise to me!
Couple more topics to finish with. The Warriors, how deep into the playoffs does the team go? Because playoffs have been secured, 15 wins. There is going to be a home semi-final. It's been a remarkable season. It's not going to stop here, though. I mean, this is really important that the Warriors actually don't just get to those playoffs and fall over, that they actually make an account of themselves, because 15 wins says you're one of the three best teams in the comp right now.
Yeah, and look, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, they've won, 6 in a row now. The last 3 have been scratchy wins, but you're still winning. And we can sort of sit here and go, yeah, but the performance curve while we're winning, it's still probably angling slightly down. But then I think if you do your due diligence to all of those other teams, maybe outside of Brisbane and Penrith, you can probably say the same thing. They're all a little bit mentally fatigued. They're all a little bit physically fatigued. They're all carrying just a few little injuries. So how do you manage it now? So if you beat the Dragons this week, do we bring up that dreaded word of maybe rest and rotation for the final game against the Dolphins and just give some of those marquee players just that extra week off? It'd be nice to, it would be nice to kick on. Yep, the start of the season, let's make the 8. Then it's let's make the 4. Well, now we're in the 4. You got 2 lives. Let's take it. I just don't like this NRL who have control after this first round of the playoffs in terms of owning it, and we can take games. I mean, Mount Smart, I'll keep saying this, Mount Smart is a shithole, but it's the Warriors shithole. It's our shithole, and it actually works. It's got its idiosyncrasies, and it's a tough place to come and play. And giving up Mount Smart Stadium to go play at Eden Park, I think is disgraceful. Absolutely appalling.
Final topic. Well, we've got a couple we could squeeze in some NPC, which has been actually off to a rocket ride. I don't know how many people are watching it because no one's turning up to the actual games. I mean, a few brave, hardy souls, a few hundred maybe at a game, but the quality of the rugby's been brilliant. Some of the results have been very unexpected. And we've got a Ranfurly Shield Challenge tomorrow, Mark, which has got real meaning to it. Wellington versus Tasman. Look, at 7 o'clock at night on a Wednesday. I don't know what kind of crowd they'll get in the capital for this. If it is at the Cake Tin, it'll be empty yellow seats. We know that, which is a real shame because I actually feel that there's something riding on this and 2 teams that will be desperate to win that trophy.
No one will turn up. Some people in Tasman will care. They'll be reminiscing about Marlborough winning the Ranfurly Shield back in 1973. One of the great moments in provincial rugby in New Zealand. Certainly one of the great moments. If you talk to people 30 years ago about rugby, and it's a shame, and it will just be full of a whole lot of yellow seats. I actually had to remind myself who actually held the Ranfurly Shield just the other day. Actually, I was thinking, God, if I ever got to sit down and interview Mark Robertson, that'd be the first question I'd ask him: who holds the Ranfurly Shield? Just to see if he actually knew, because I'm not sure that if you went down the street, too many people could actually tell you
No,
automatically.
they probably wouldn't.
Which is an absolute shame, and again just highlights just how far removed New Zealand rugby are from the domestic game. It's one of the great trophies, isn't it? And it's almost, I'm not sure that kids growing up who are playing, say, club rugby for Cumia or in the area that I live would even be aware of what the Ranfurly Shield is. Look, I quietly hope Tasman can take it off Wellington tomorrow. That'll hurt you, Martin, because I know you're a Wellington man. But, Tasman might just be one of those last few provinces that actually generally places some real emphasis on it.
Apologise to me!
Finally, the World Athletics champs, mate, and New Zealanders crashing out and perhaps performing a little bit under expectations, but that's the way to competition. You are playing the best in the world, and it doesn't matter what kind of form you take in, you've got to produce it on the day. That's what I love about these championships and the Olympics as well. It may not necessarily be the top athlete who wins it, it's whoever turns up and actually performs at that particular time. What are the highlights for you that you've seen so far?
Yeah, look, I've just been trying to follow. Really the New Zealand athletes here. I was sort of hoping a little bit more from Sam Tanner, missing out on the 1500 metre final. I often say this at the big meets: the hardest events at the Olympic Games to me are the semi-finals of the 8 and 1500 metres, because they are just so tactical. They can be run so incredibly slow, and it's very, very hard for runners in terms of a strategy. Really disappointing that we didn't see our pole vaulters, Eliza McCartney, even qualify. And then Tom Walsh finishing sort of fourth as well. I like what Geordie Beamish is doing in the 3,000 metre steeplechase. The long-standing New Zealand record was held by the great Peter Renner. He's now surpassing that. Peter Renner was a hell of an athlete. But yeah, look, I think what people have got to realise, and you sort of summed it up a point there, Martin, is that unlike a lot of sports, the All Blacks lose one week while they get a chance the following week, or if you miss out on a golf tournament, you've got another opportunity the next week. And a lot of sports like that. You've got to get it right on one given day once a year. It used to be once every 2 years. You've got to try and peak in sports where if one part of your technique is slightly out, it affects every other part of the technique. And that's what we're dealing with. Tough for guys like Hamish Kerr in the high jump, who, Commonwealth Games gold medals, won a Diamond League meet this year, has been third at the indoors, and he can't qualify. It just shows the fickle nature of it and just how tough it is at the highest level. I'd like to think that they look at what they've done leading into these World Championships. Did we compete enough? Did we not compete enough? What did we not do right? Did we leave New Zealand too late? Did we leave New Zealand too soon? And use that then as a template or as a learning in regards to maybe how they build up for the Olympic Games next year. But yeah, look, I'm still quite cynical about a lot of what I see in track and field these days, Martin. It's the old saying, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be legal. And you've only got to go and Google and have a look at the number of African athletes these days have been busted for drugs and all the different controversies around it. I look at some of the times in the women's 100 metres, 10.65, and, I'm highly suspicious of some of those times that are being run. When I look at someone like a Zoe Hobbs, who can't even get through the semi-finals yet, I'm not sure that you can work any harder than probably what she works and necessarily have that much more talent.
Devlin. You better believe it! The platform.